Orion 7 wasn't the kind of place where history happened. It was one of 100 human frontier colonies scattered across the galaxy, a planet chosen for its abundance of Varlaxia-made rare mineral essential for interstellar travel. The settlers led quiet, hard lives, mining the purple glinting ore from jagged cliffs and enduring the planet's erratic weather. Few dared to dream of excitement, fewer still wanted it. But on the morning of the Zrithian invasion, excitement arrived with a vengeance. It started with a shimmer in the sky, like a heat mirage, followed by a violent rip in the fabric of the atmosphere. A rift opened, pulsing with violet energy, and from it descended alien ships, black and angular, their surfaces rippling as if alive. The settlers gathered in the square, eyes wide and mouths agape, as the ships landed with bone-rattling thuds. Then came the sound. A roar, deep and guttural, resonated through the air, silencing every human voice. It wasn't the kind of noise an animal made, it was something ancient, primal, designed to strike fear into the very core of its listeners. People dropped their tools, children clung to their parents, and even the colony's sentry drones shut down, overwhelmed by the sheer terror in that sound. The Zrithians emerged. They were taller than humans, their metallic gray skin gleaming under Orion 7's two suns. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their voices were a harsh, grinding language that sounded like machinery tearing itself apart. At their head was Commander Krynth, a towering figure whose sharp, angular armor made him look more machine than living being. He carried a staff crackling with energy and regarded the humans with the cold disdain of a predator sizing up its prey. Humans of Orion 7, Krynth's translator boomed, his voice mechanical and unfeeling, your existence on this planet is now under Zrithian control. Obey, and you may yet survive. The settlers froze, too terrified to respond. And then it appeared. Lufrak, the Alpha Apex, emerged from one of the Zrithian ships, its massive paws hitting the ground with a force that seemed to shake the planet. The creature was a nightmare given form 10 feet tall at the shoulder, its sleek black fur glinting like obsidian, and its eyes burning like molten lava. Each step it took left scorch marks on the ground. Its fangs, as long as a man's forearm, glistened with venom. It sniffed the air, its breath curling like smoke, and let out a growl that silenced even the Zrithians. The settlers backed away as the beast prowled forward, its glowing eyes scanning the crowd. Krynth raised his staff, and Lufrak stopped, waiting for its master's command. The message was clear: submission or annihilation. Among the crowd, a small voice broke the silence. Puppy? Heads turned in disbelief as a little boy stepped forward. Eli, barely 6 years old, was a familiar sight around the colony, often found chasing insects or pretending to be a starship captain. His mop of brown hair was tousled, his cheeks smudged with dirt, and he held a battered toy spaceship in one hand. The settlers gasped as he walked toward the deadly creature, oblivious to the danger. Eli, his mother screamed, her voice cracking with panic. She tried to run after him, but a neighbor grabbed her arm, whispering, "Don't move. He'll see you." Eli didn't stop. His eyes were wide, not with fear but with wonder. To him, Lufrak didn't look like a monster. It looked like the wolf from his favorite Hollow story, the one about brave explorers befriending alien creatures. He reached out a tiny hand. Lufrak's growl deepened. The settlers held their breath, expecting the boy to be torn apart. Krynth tilted his head, curious but unconcerned. "Another foolish human," he muttered in Zrithian. Eli giggled. "Good puppy," he said, his voice full of childish innocence. And then, to everyone's shock, he leaned in and kissed the tip of Lufrak's nose. The beast froze. Its glowing eyes flickered, the fiery intensity dimming for a brief moment. It tilted its massive head, letting out a low, confused rumble. Eli giggled again and patted its snout. "You're soft," he declared, his voice bright and unafraid. The settlers stared, paralyzed by disbelief. Even the Zrithians murmured among themselves, their expressions ranging from confusion to unease. KRYNTH took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "What is this?" he growled. "Lufrak, attack!" The beast didn't move. Lufrak, the deadliest creation in the Zrithian arsenal, lowered its head and gently nudged Eli with its nose, letting out a soft, almost apologetic whine. The settlers gasped. KRYNTH's eyes blazed with fury. "Impossible," he snarled. "This cannot be." Eli wrapped his arms around the wolf's snout, smiling. "I like you," he said simply. The impossible had happened. The deadliest alien wolf in the galaxy had been tamed by a little human boy. For a long moment, time seemed to freeze in the square. The settlers, Zrithians, and even Lufrak remained motionless, as if the universe itself struggled to process what had just happened. A 6-year-old boy had done the unthinkable. He'd pacified the galaxy's most feared predator with a kiss and a hug. Eli, completely unaware of the commotion around him, laughed and scratched behind Lufrak's enormous ears. The creature's tail, as thick as a tree trunk, gave a hesitant wag, sending a cloud of dust swirling into the air. The settlers stared in disbelief, their minds grappling with the surreal sight. But Commander KRYNTH's shock quickly turned to rage. "Lufrak!" KRYNTH barked in Zrithian, his voice sharp and commanding. The words translated through his universal communicator into a harsh monotone: "Subdue the human now, or you will be terminated." Lufrak growled low in its throat, but the sound wasn't directed at Eli. The settlers gasped as the beast turned, positioning itself between the boy and the Zrithians. Its molten eyes glared at KRYNTH, and a warning snarl rumbled from deep within its chest. For the first time, the settlers saw fear flicker in the commander's cold, metallic gaze. "This isn't possible," one Zrithian soldier muttered. "The apex cannot defy direct orders." "It's defective," another hissed. "No," KRYNTH snapped, his voice trembling with suppressed fury. "The human has corrupted it. Kill the boy." The order sent shockwaves through the settlers. Eli's mother, still held back by a neighbor, screamed, "No! Leave him alone!" Tears streaked her face as she struggled to free herself, but no one dared move toward the boy. They were all frozen with fear. The Zrithian soldiers hesitated, uncertain. Lufrak's defiance wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. For centuries, the Zrithians had relied on the Alpha Apex as their ultimate weapon, an unflinching enforcer of their will. To see it ripple, and for a human child no less, was unthinkable. KRYNTH, unwilling to lose face, raised his staff. It crackled with energy, arcs of violet lightning snapping across its surface. "If the soldiers won't act, I will." The settlers braced for the worst, expecting the Zrithian leader to unleash some terrible weapon. But before KRYNTH could fire, Lufrak moved. Faster than anyone could react, the massive wolf lunged forward, slamming its paw into the ground between KRYNTH and Eli. The impact sent a shockwave rippling outward, knocking the Zrithians off their feet and scattering their weapons. The settlers gasped. KRYNTH staggered backward, his staff slipping from his grip. Lufrak let out a deafening roar, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the bones of everyone present. It wasn't the roar of a beast, it was a warning. And it was enough to shatter the illusion of Zrithian invincibility. As the Zrithians scrambled to regroup, chaos erupted in the colony. The settlers, emboldened by the sight of the apex turning on its masters, began to resist. Someone threw a rock at the aliens, striking one in the chest. Another settler grabbed a discarded energy weapon and fired, forcing a Zrithian soldier into cover. Eli's father, a broad-shouldered miner named Jonas, rallied the others. "They're not invincible," he shouted. "We can fight back." The settlers cheered and surged forward, a tide of fury and desperation. KRYNTH roared in anger, his glowing eyes narrowing as he watched the tide turn. He raised his communicator to his lips and barked an order in Zrithian. "Deploy the drones." Eliminate the resistance. Above the colony, the sleek Drithian ships began to hum, their underbellies opening to release swarms of black, insect-like drones. The machines descended in formation, their red lights blinking as they prepared to attack. The settlers faltered, their brief hope replaced with dread. But before the drones could fire, Lufrak sprang into action. The massive wolf moved with astonishing speed and agility, leaping into the air and swatting the first wave of drones with its enormous claws. The machines shattered like glass, their fragments raining down onto the colony square. Lufrak's movements were fluid, almost graceful, as it tore through the swarm, protecting the settlers below. Eli, still perched on the beast's back, cheered. "Get him, puppy," he shouted, raising his toy spaceship like a sword. The settlers stared in awe as Lufrak fought for them, its sheer power turning the tide of battle. For the first time, the colonists had a chance not just to survive, but to win. Amid the chaos, Krynth regrouped with his soldiers. He glared at Lufrak, his mind racing. This wasn't just a failure, it was an insult. The Drithians' greatest weapon had turned against them, and a child was at the center of it all. "We can't let this stand," Krynth growled. "Prepare the containment array. If we can't control the apex, we'll destroy it." "But Commander," one soldier stammered, the human boy Dash. "I don't care." Krynth snapped. "Take the boy if you must, but that creature must be neutralized. Do it now." As the Drithians began setting up their containment device, a pulsating sphere of energy designed to immobilize even the strongest of creatures, Lufrak seemed to sense the danger. It growled, its fur bristling, and glanced back at Eli as if seeking guidance. Eli, with the unshakable confidence of a child, patted the wolf's neck. "Don't let them hurt my friends, okay?" Lufrak let out a low whine, then turned to face the Drithians, planting itself firmly between the settlers and their attackers. The settlers, emboldened once more, began fighting back with renewed vigor. But the battle wasn't over. The Drithians weren't finished. And neither was Lufrak. The battle had become a whirlwind of chaos. Lufrak's massive form darted through the square, swatting drones out of the sky and scattering Drithian soldiers with terrifying ease. The settlers, armed with scavenged weapons and raw determination, fought alongside their newfound protector. For the first time, it felt like the invaders might be stopped. But Commander Krynth's containment array was nearing completion. The pulsating energy sphere, suspended between towering pylons, began to hum with power. Its glow cast eerie shadows across the battlefield. The settlers didn't know what it was, but Lufrak did. The beast snarled, sensing the threat, and charged toward the array. "Now!" Krynth roared. The Drithians activated the device. Bands of crackling energy shot from the pylons, encircling Lufrak and locking it in place. The great wolf howled in pain as the energy tightened around it like a net. Eli, still clinging to the beast's back, cried out as Lufrak stumbled, struggling against the invisible bonds. "No!" Eli screamed. "Let him go!" Krynth stepped forward, his cold gaze fixed on the boy. "You should have stayed hidden, human," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Now you will watch as your friend is destroyed." Eli's small fists clenched. "You're mean," he shouted, his voice trembling with both fear and anger. "Lufrak's not bad. You made him this way." Krynth's expression hardened. "The apex exists to obey. It is a weapon, nothing more." But Eli wasn't listening. As the energy bands tightened around Lufrak, the boy did the only thing he could think of. He hugged the wolf's neck and whispered, "I won't leave you." The settlers, seeing their last hope trapped, began to falter. Some tried to charge the array, but Drithian soldiers cut them down with precision fire. Others fell back, despair spreading through their ranks. Eli's father, Jonas, grabbed a discarded energy rifle and turned to the crowd. "We can't give up now," he shouted. That boy is my son, and that wolf is the only thing keeping us alive. If we don't act, it's over for all of us." His words sparked a new wave of courage. The settlers rallied, launching a desperate assault on the Zrithian forces. Makeshift explosives and mining tools became weapons as they surged forward, determined to destroy the array. Meanwhile, Eli clung tightly to Lufrek as the wolf struggled against the containment field. The energy bands crackled, sapping the creature's strength with every passing second. Eli's tiny hands pressed against the wolf's fur as he whispered, "You're not just a weapon. You're my friend." Lufrek let out a low whine, its glowing eyes meeting Eli's. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. A faint light began to radiate from the boy's hands, spreading across Lufrek's body. The settlers, Zrithians, and even Krynth paused, stunned by the sight. "What is this?" Krynth growled. "What is he doing?" Eli didn't understand it either, but he didn't care. All he knew was that he had to help his friend. The light grew brighter, and Lufrek let out a roar not of pain, but of defiance. The containment field flickered, cracks forming in the energy bands. "No!" Krynth shouted, his voice filled with panic. "That's impossible. The field is unbreakable." With one final burst of strength, Lufrek shattered the containment array. The energy bands disintegrated in a blinding flash, and the wolf rose to its full height, letting out a deafening roar that shook the ground. Eli laughed, his arms still wrapped around the beast's neck. "You did it, buddy," he cried. The tide of battle turned once again. Lufrek, now free, launched itself at the Zrithians with renewed fury. The settlers, inspired by the wolf's resilience, fought harder than ever. One by one, the invaders fell back, their forces crumbling under the combined might of the settlers and their unlikely ally. But Krynth wasn't finished. The Zrithian commander activated a control panel on his gauntlet, summoning reinforcements from the orbiting ships. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. "I will destroy this colony, your people, and that abomination." Before Krynth could issue his next command, a shadow fell over him. He looked up just in time to see Lufrek descending from above, its massive jaws open wide. With a single swipe of its claws, the wolf sent the Zrithian leader flying, his gauntlet sparking as it hit the ground. Krynth landed hard, coughing and groaning as he tried to stand. Lufrek loomed over him, its glowing eyes filled with fury. But before the beast could strike, Eli slid down from its back and stood between the two. "Stop," Eli said firmly. "You're not like him. You're better." Lufrek hesitated, its growl subsiding. The settlers watched in awe as the great wolf stepped back, sparing the Zrithian leader. Krynth, battered and humiliated, glared at the boy. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You've made a powerful enemy today." As the commander limped away, his surviving soldiers retreating with him, the settlers erupted in cheers. The Zrithians had been defeated, and for the first time, the people of Orion 7 felt hope. In the aftermath of the battle, Lufrek stood at the edge of the square, watching the settlers celebrate. Eli's parents rushed to their son, hugging him tightly and scolding him in equal measure. "Don't you ever scare us like that again," his mother sobbed. "We thought we lost you." Eli grinned. "I wasn't scared. Lufrek protected me." Jonas looked up at the wolf, his expression a mix of gratitude and unease. "That thing saved us," he admitted. "But what happens now?" Eli walked over to Lufrek and placed a hand on its snout. "He stays with us," he said firmly. "He's not just a thing. He's family." The settlers murmured among themselves, some nodding in agreement, others still wary. But as they looked at the boy and the wolf standing side by side, a sense of quiet reverence settled over the crowd. Whatever the future held, one thing was clear: Eli and Lufrek had changed everything. The twin suns of Orion 7 dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in hues of deep orange and violet. The settlers, weary and bloodied, gathered in the square, where the great wolf Lufrek stood guard. For the first time in living memory, they felt victorious. But the Zrithians had retreated only temporarily. Commander Krynth, humiliated but unbroken, was not the kind to admit defeat. High above, the Zrithian motherships moved into position, their shadows stretching across the colony. Alarms blared as the settlers spotted the dark shapes blotting out the stars. From within one of the ships, Krynth's voice echoed over the settlement's comm systems, dripping with venom. "Humans of Orion 7, he sneered, your moment of defiance will be your undoing. Surrender the boy and the apex, or face annihilation." The settlers exchanged worried glances. Their victory had been hard-fought, but they were outmatched against the full might of the Zrithian fleet. Fear crept back into their hearts as the skies lit up with the ominous glow of the invaders' weapon systems. Eli stood at Lufrek's side, his small hand resting on the wolf's massive paw. "They're coming back," he whispered, his voice trembling. Lufrek let out a low growl, its glowing eyes fixed on the motherships. The wolf's fur bristled, and a deep rumble vibrated through the ground. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. Eli's father, Jonas, stepped forward, his face grim. "We can't fight that," he said, pointing to the fleet. "We don't have the weapons or the numbers." Eli looked up at Lufrek, his eyes wide with determination. "We don't have to fight them alone." The settlers stared at the boy, confusion and doubt written on their faces. "What are you saying, Eli?" his mother asked, her voice breaking. "I don't know how I did it," Eli said, his voice small but steady, "but I helped Lufrek break free. I think I can do more." In the sky, Krynth's patience wore thin. He raised his gauntlet, its glowing interface flickering as he prepared to issue the final command. "They've made their choice," he growled. "Target the settlement. Wipe it from the surface of the planet." But as his finger hovered over the controls, a sound pierced the air, a deep, resonant howl. It wasn't just a sound, it was a vibration that seemed to resonate in the bones of every living thing. The settlers froze. The Zrithian soldiers hesitated. Even Krynth faltered, his hand shaking. Lufrek stood tall, its head thrown back as it howled into the sky. The sound carried for miles, echoing across the barren landscape. The settlers covered their ears, overwhelmed by the sheer power of it. Then the ground began to tremble. From the wilderness surrounding the colony, shapes began to emerge, shapes that glowed faintly in the darkness. At first, the settlers thought their eyes were playing tricks on them. But as the shapes drew closer, they realized the truth. Wolves. Dozens of them. Smaller than Lufrek but no less imposing, their sleek forms moved with deadly grace, their eyes burning with the same fiery light. These were apex progeny, other creations of the Zrithians, scattered across the galaxy but now answering the call of their alpha. The settlers gasped as the wolves circled the colony, their glowing eyes fixed on the sky. Lufrek stepped forward, its head held high, and let out another commanding howl. The pack responded in unison, their voices blending into a symphony of defiance. Eli grinned. "See? We're not alone." Krynth's face twisted in fury as he watched the scene unfold on his command screen. "Impossible," he roared. The apex progeny were scattered and abandoned. They can't unite. But unite they had. The wolves, responding to Lufrek's call, turned their glowing eyes toward the motherships. Their howls shifted in pitch, resonating at frequencies that caused the Zrithian ships to shudder. "They're targeting our systems," a Zrithian officer shouted. "They're destabilizing the energy cores." Krynth's eyes widened as he realized the wolves were communicating in a way the Zrithians hadn't anticipated. Their howls, amplified by some unknown resonance, were disrupting the fleet's advanced technology. "Shut them down," he bellowed. Deploy the antimatter cannons. The settlers watched in awe and terror as the Zrithian motherships fired. Beams of crackling energy shot toward the wolves, scorching the ground and leaving craters in their wake. But the wolves were fast, darting through the chaos with uncanny precision. Lufrak led the charge, its massive form leaping into the air and landing atop a downed Zrithian drone. It tore through the machine, sending sparks flying. The settlers joined the fray, using their mining tools and scavenged weapons to fight back. Eli, still at Lufrak's side, raised his toy spaceship and shouted, "We can do this!" As the battle raged, Lufrak turned its eyes to the largest mothership, where KRYNTH stood watching from the command deck. With a final, bone-shaking roar, the Alpha Wolf leapt, using its immense strength to propel itself toward the ship. The settlers and Zrithians alike stopped and stared as the massive wolf reached the vessel, claws sinking into its hull. Inside the command deck, KRYNTH stumbled as the ship lurched. "What is that beast doing?" he shouted. Lufrak, clinging to the ship, let out a deafening howl. The sound reverberated through the vessel, shattering consoles and short-circuiting systems. Sparks flew as the ship's power core began to overload. KRYNTH's officers begged him to retreat, but the commander refused. "I will not be bested by a beast," he snarled. On the ground, Eli watched as Lufrak roared again, the light in its eyes burning brighter than ever. The ship shuddered violently, its engines sputtering. Eli's heart raced. "Come back, Lufrak," he called, tears streaming down his face. As if hearing the boy's plea, Lufrak leapt from the mothership just as it exploded in a blinding flash of light. The settlers shielded their eyes, and when the dust cleared, they saw the great wolf standing in the square, battered but alive. The Zrithian fleet, now leaderless and crippled, began to retreat. One by one, the ships vanished into the void, leaving Orion 7 behind. The settlers erupted in cheers, their cries echoing across the battlefield. Eli ran to Lufrak, throwing his arms around the wolf's neck. "You did it," he sobbed. "You saved us." Lufrak let out a low, contented growl, nuzzling the boy gently. Jonas approached, his expression one of awe and gratitude. "You saved us all," he said, his voice trembling. "Thank you." The settlers gathered around, their fear of the great wolf replaced with admiration and respect. Lufrak, once a weapon of destruction, had become a symbol of hope. As the twin suns rose over Orion 7, the settlers began to rebuild, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they weren't alone. Eli and Lufrak stood at the edge of the colony, watching the dawn together. "You're not just my friend," Eli whispered, his hand resting on the wolf's fur. "You're family." Lufrak let out a soft whine and wagged its tail, its fiery eyes glowing with warmth. For the first time in its existence, the Alpha Apex had found its purpose not as a weapon, but as a protector.